Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Daily Objective. And today is everybody's favorite day of the week. It's the Thursday Collective episode. And so far, there's only a couple of us here, but we're expecting some surprises. Hopefully, more co-hosts joining us as the show progresses. Please leave a like. Please make sure you're subscribed and hit that join button if you're watching on YouTube to unlock special features and exclusive content and support this wonderful network. All right, let's talk about today's subject. What has objectivism really done for you? It's obviously, as you may know, the philosophy of Ayn Rand. And, often people have very vague, general, abstract answers. It helped my career, it helped my life, it improved things for me. But we're going to be talking about concrete specifics here. We're going to get real specific, real close and personal. So you better be ready. Buckle in. And let's meet my co-host here, the first of several, I hope. It's Nikos Rucka.
Nice to be with you. So let's start with very, very specific. So first time I read Atlas Shrugged, I found I was so much captivated from the plot that I didn't really manage to get into the ideas. So what I'm going to say is from the second time I read the book. Now, I've lost count how many times I've read or listened to it. It's mostly once every year. So I'm at some point like 7th or 8th time. So this is not flexing, but also maybe it is. Okay, so the first thing that I really remember having an effect on me, the relationship between Hank Rearden and Dagny. Now, why this had an effect on me? So I had, let's say in my wider environment, someone, a married guy, who was having an affair and he ended up getting a divorce and leaving his family, going to pursue a new love. Now, till the point when I read Atlas, my idea was, look, someone has the right to do this, but this is something definitely which is morally bad. So why? Because you cannot only think about yourself, you also need to think of someone else. The person left behind indeed was very sad, and you could say it almost ruined her, the quality of her life, not to use kind of stronger words. But reading the Hank Dagny story, I viewed it from a different point of view. I've read from the point of view that that something is also difficult for anyone who is involved, but also that you have a right to your happiness. So the question is, would it be better if someone would, let's say, not do it and do the conventional thing, which is no, stay at your home. You have, as Hank says, I've given a promise, I have to stick with it. Well, would it work well for Hank? And the answer is obviously not. Now, having said that, a trap that I fell, particularly the first couple of times I was reading Atlas Shrugged, is getting so much drawn from the heroes that I think I see the heroes all around me. So there's that, like this person who is running a business, oh my God, he's a Dagny. Or that person, that close person which is close to me, oh, he's Hank. No, he's not Hank. Like the person left behind was not a Lillian, so she wasn't like an evil person, but also the protagonist of that story was not Hank. But it helped me see it from a different perspective. It helped me see it from the perspective that, no, people have a right to their happiness, which again, in theory, we all know it, but when you see it concretized, it helped me reshape this story, which was big because that person has been quite close in my life. So this was a first tangible, let's say, contribution of objectivism in my life. Low level, you could say, but it was important for me.
That's really interesting. Now, I tend to caution oftentimes against the misuse of some of these sort of tools that philosophy gives us. So someone might read Atlas Shrugged and think okay, I can cheat. I can walk out of my commitments, sort of almost really just led by emotions. I mean, you got to be very sober. I say very careful. There will be consequences if you decide to end a marriage or to have an affair. There will be consequences that will affect yourself and everybody. It's not always as cut and dry, I think, like you were saying, as Hank Rearden, who is a moral hero, versus his wife, who is beyond disgraceful. And yeah, and it's literature too. I mean, you got to kind of remember, like, so things happen for literary purposes that would not necessarily work out the same way in real life. So yeah, it was very interesting. A couple super chats before we continue, I suppose. Bonnie with $5 says, reason and sanity on a daily basis. Who could ask for anything more? And there's some musical notes there. Not sure if I was supposed to sing that. Marilyn with $3. Thank you. Roland with €1.99 says, it's made me read Hugo. Well, that sounds wonderful. I have not yet. But
also, if you want, not with a super chat, our friend, where to start with Hugo? I don't want to read the Les Miserables, and I'm not good when it comes to novels with many characters. I think I want to read that novel of Hugo, which is this, I think it's A Year. I don't remember the exact title. And I think Lisa in Read With Me is reading it now, or she has suggested it. So if people have Hugo suggestions, please give them to me. I'll check them out. They don't have to be a super chat. Thanks.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I have a couple of Hugo books I haven't read yet. Les Miserables, I guess is how you pronounce it. And I think maybe his first ever, it's about Africa or something. I forget what it's called. It's got like a French name or something. Or no, that's the other one. Anyway, it doesn't. Who cares is the other question. All right, so I guess I'll go next. We're gonna probably end up naming several, each of us, especially if no one else ends up showing up. The part about reading Atlas Shrugged reminded me just kind of the realization that philosophy itself can address so much. So like up until that point in my life, like my inner world was just a mess. I'm just swimming through different ideas, being a hit with all these different influences, trying to figure out how do I reconcile all these differing views and what does this all mean? And I mean, seeing in the portion of the John Galt speech that I did read the first time around, I ended up, I guess, flipping through a few of the pages way back then. But reading the parts that I read was pretty amazing, where the differentiation between mystics of the muscle versus mystics of the spirit. Basically, I guess Rand saying that the communists and the religionists, they are not opposites. They're not opposites. They're, I guess you would say, variants of the same type of error, or they're variants of an errorful way to go, an erroneous way to go. So there is reason. There is the correct relationship between your mind and reality. And then there's everything else. So I guess, yeah, again, the realization that philosophy can identify these things and offer such clarity was a huge thing. So so reading Rand and learning Objectivism has put the word philosophy in my vocabulary in a way that it hadn't been before. Do you want to comment on that? Do you want me to list another thing, or do you want to list another thing? What would you like to do?
So I cannot comment on that because it's at a high level. So usually, again, the books have a very, very real, concrete effects on me. So I'll name a second one, which is a bit maybe more spicy, let's say. So it has to do with, and it can be easily misunderstood. It has to do with Francisco's speech to Hank Reardon when it comes to sex. And it made me change my view on casual sex. Now, this doesn't mean that I was like swimming on casual sex. And after that, I was like, okay, enough. I don't want to swim in casual sex anymore. But there was this idea, particularly post 1968, that obviously that sex is good. Therefore, why not do it in general? It's a value in itself. And also, not only it's a value in itself, that to be a proper man, you also have to pursue it and not say no to it and all that stuff. And again, it wasn't in the first time I read it. It wasn't even in the second. It was probably the first time in my fourth reading of the book that monologue really stuck in my mind. And the other thing that stuck in my mind is that this is such a special view because it doesn't fall in the conservative trope, which says that sex outside of marriage is evil. So 2 weeks ago, when we had the leak of the abortion, of the case of the Supreme Court related to the abortion, we had all these conservatives saying, hey, if you don't want to get pregnant, maybe you shouldn't have sex outside of marriage. And you could sense, I'm sure you commented on it in the Daily Objective, this disdain for sex. So Francisco's comments on sex, he basically dismisses casual sex because he elevates sex so high. And this was something that I hadn't realized, that in a way sex is too important to be casual. So this false dichotomy that says sex is good, therefore enjoy it as much wherever, whenever, versus no, sex, it's only good in very particular situation. This dichotomy, and I remember the moment, I remember where I were when it really, it kind of, okay, now I get it. So this was a second way that objectivism had a very direct impact in my life. Francisco's speech on sex, and it was like from one day to another, literally from one day to another, it made me change my view on this topic.
That's interesting. Anytime like Ayn Rand like offers her conclusion derived from her experience, it's like kind of a challenge, I guess, to kind of rather than to just kind of adopt that perspective, to kind of like ask, so, do I agree? Like, is it and then to kind of learn it in life itself. Now, there are bigger degradations of sex than having it casually. There's blind orgies. They're just like, and this is probably more the spirit of the hippies, just having drug-induced, ungroomed, sloppy, smelly people just going into a party or into a tent and just like kind of they're quote celebrating. They're celebrating the lack of choice, the lack of hierarchy, the lack of discrimination. So I think, divorcing sex from values, I think, is kind of as low as you can sink. Having sex casually, I mean, I don't think the word casual is anywhere in Francisco's speech. Now I'm not necessarily saying people should have it casually. What I would say, and what I think an objectivist sort of take on virtually everything is to ask why do you want this? What is your driving purpose? So it kind of what I'm getting at, another error someone could make with the type of lesson that you took from Francisco's speech is to think that like you need to meet your John Galt, you need to meet your Dagny, right? You need to be 100% sure this is your soulmate before, kind of knocking boots, as they would say in the streets. But that's not necessarily how life actually works. A lot of the time, things start off more on a casual level, not to say that you're closed off from it becoming serious, but things start off low pressure and increase in its importance. The relationship increases in its importance over time. Every case is unique, and every person is unique. So rather than, let me finish my point here. Yeah. Rather than looking for the code to follow, what should I do vis-a-vis sex? Actually ask what is now I don't remember what does this mean to me and why am I doing this? And yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was about to say. It might sound a bit subjective, but in a way there are no rules. It's what is the context and what does it mean for you? Why do you do it? Do you do it because you're told you have to do it? You're told that you have to up your your conquest or whatever, or does it mean something very important for you? And so in a way, do it for selfish reasons, if that makes sense. But we reach exactly the same conclusion.
Yeah. So Rand said in an interview or a Q&A once that like she disapproves of one night stands, right? Which, and for the reasons that I think you described, like sex is too important to just do it, just one night and you'll never see the person again. But again, there's like this temptation to just take her worldview and just say, okay, this is my worldview. But is that always the case, that a one night stand? I mean, what if you're traveling and you have an amazing night, an amazing weekend, whatever it is, that your chances of seeing this person again for a number of reasons is just not going to happen. Would it be wrong to have sex? I mean, that some would say that's very life affirming. Or maybe you have sex with somebody who you meet because there's mutual attraction, which when you kind of unpack is values, you see your values in the other person. But then once you have sex, you realize, at some point later on, you realize, okay, this is actually not going to work out. So then it became a one night stand where it wasn't necessarily going to be one. So does that mean now you've sinned according to objectivism? Of course not. So again, what Ayn Rand kind of concludes, or what she says in some of her statements, is not necessarily like a one size fits all kind of code to follow. Only the fundamentals, I think, are a code to sort of adopt wholesale, like entirely, such as reason as an absolute and selfishness as the proper, selfishness as the proper, yourself as the proper beneficiary. Okay. Should I go now? I guess I've got
your
my
turn,
right?
Well, it's not that I have that many more left, so we're probably going to go for one more
round. I'm running low on items as well. It doesn't. I'm starting to wonder if Mark and Amanda, and I gave the surprise away, if they're going to make it. Yeah, this was the one I had. Okay, yeah, this is it. The realization that method is everything. That how you arrive at your conclusions is how you know your conclusions are your conclusions. So to just, and this kind of ties into what we were just talking about a little bit, just adopting the truth, like just adopting what seems to be true, is not the same as understanding the steps by which you arrive at those conclusions. So in that respect, even Ayn Rand's philosophy cannot just be adopted in one session or in a short amount of time. To really understand her philosophy, like any philosophy, I think, is to understand how it developed, or by what steps you reach those conclusions. And this has been, I think, very useful for me in a number of ways. One example being personal, another being in assessing the culture and in politics as well. So it can range from deeply personal to, the sort of most, quote, superficial of arenas, such as, politics. So, and on the personal level, I think I've had a tendency in my life to project narratives, to kind of write stories in my mind at light speed. I think part of that comes from kind of a religious indoctrination early on, where like the metaphysics are very Platonic. God is this absolute Platonic thing that creates everything. God creates poof, world, poof, sin, poof, man's soul. Just like everything is like kind of everything's like a Platonic form, rather than reality, rather than looking at the world inductively and conceptualizing from observation. So so I've struggled with that in my life, like projecting a narrative rather than actually looking at the facts and being very sober in sort of composing a proper narrative, I suppose. So that's on the personal level. On the political level, I'll give two examples. One of them will, be triggering to the left, and the other, of course, triggering to the right. So when it came to the George Floyd killing, of course, we know very clearly that the police officer's knee was on George Floyd's neck. What we cannot conclude from that video is that that he did it because George Floyd is black. We cannot conclude from that also that this is part of a systematic police brutality like system of oppression, and that could turn out to be true, but we don't know that just from looking at the image. We also don't know that this is part of an historical string of events in which whites are, oppressing blacks by any way they can. I mean, there's so many ways that people immediately projected a narrative based on this video and just saying, yes, this is the battle of our lifetime. This is, this is the battle of the centuries of finally taking on this racist beast that looms above us. And I think it was a very crucial time for people to just be very calm and ask, what do I actually observe? What do I actually know from my observation, rather than creating a narrative, which obviously caused many people to be very destructive to themselves and to others. I'll give another example of this realization, why method is everything. And then of course, Donald Trump. So Donald Trump gets up on election night and he just announced, we won. That's it. Like they're still counting the votes. He just says, we won, and they're stealing the votes. So if whatever you hear after this, just disregard. He says, we won. And that to me was like the moment I became a never Trumper, ironically enough. I mean, before that, I obviously was not crazy. I was very apprehensive at first and then very negative about Trump. But this was the point where I finally understood like kind of what's so bad about Trump. And he could have wonderful policies. He can have all types of great policies. But if his policies were not founded on anything coherent and rational, and if he's making the world a place where a political leader says whatever passes through his head, he just says, we won, and they're stealing the votes, and if people and his base or the audience runs with it, they immediately agree with it. That to me is scarier than almost any policy. So there we go. We've triggered just about everybody in my example of why method is everything.
So, and this has also got to do with potential allies, people we might agree on some things. The question is, how did they reach that conclusion? So we might agree with free speech, and then they say, oh, free speech is important because it's democracy, whatever. Like, well, no, that's not why free speech is important. Point taken, and no disagreement here. Okay, my next example, I'm between two. I'll probably throw both, so not to leave one aside. That scene from Atlas Shrugged. So most of the things that have influenced me are from Atlas Shrugged. Dagny in the mountains. Slight spoiler alert. So she has. It was the first time she quit. She's in the mountains and she's missing her job. And she's missing her career is so important to her that her life going in circles, as she says, all things, same thing, and not forward means that her life is not going anywhere. It means that something is seriously wrong. This made me realize that was basically my life, my career. So rational, again, the mistake you can do, rationalistically, you care about your career because you're told that career is important. But at the same time, your career is not fulfilling. And this made me realize that my academic career was not very fulfilling. Of course, this was not the only thing that made me realize it, but it made me realize that, no, your career has to be more exciting. Now, a trap that you can fall there is adopt this and say, oh, now, for example, I'm working on an objectivist job, therefore now it has to be, and I'm not going to hear my emotions or what, I'm going to stop receiving messages. Now I'm having a career that I want. So drawing the right conclusion helped me realize that I need to find basically a new career. Now, this was a process that took, 4 or 5 years, but I'm not sure if this would have happened without Objectivism. Not because I ended up having a career in a full-time job in Objectivism, but because it made me realize that I needed a very particular change. It happened to be Objectivist, it could be anything else. And I think it has to do with Atlas Shrugged and how passion for work is presented there.
Yeah, that's a very common story. Even if we can abstract away the fact that the job you ended up taking has to do with objectivism explicitly, but a lot of people, Dave Rubin comes to mind. He used to tell the story that the first time he interviewed Yaron Brook, and hearing this talk about it's your life is yours, blah blah blah, ethics, whatever, be selfishness as a virtue, and all that. Immediately after the interview, Rubin turned to his team and said, I'm leaving the network we're on and I'm starting my own network, or whatever choice he was making that would kind of propel his own career, his own network. He was taking a risk, and he said, who's with me? And they all were. And there's a lot of stories like that. Many businessmen, many very successful people have a similar story, that objectivism, that Ayn Rand inspired them. So even though many of them end up believing things that are far from agreement with Rand, I say the more people are being selfish and the more people are pursuing a good life for themselves on reality's terms, I would say is better. Sorry,
one thing though.
Yes.
Again, it didn't happen in the first time. It didn't happen in the second time. This happened, I remember, with the third reading. And for some reason, not with the scene that someone works a lot, but with the scene where someone does not work. So with the scene of Dagny in the mountain. Let's go to Super Chat now. Yeah.
So this is Marilene's been a member for 2 months, and that gives us a notification where she's able to kind of super chat in a sense.
Thank you, Marilene.
Objectivism has made me more benevolent, though it took me a long time to understand that part. Yeah, and we've benefited obviously from your benevolence because you've been so supportive. Thank you for that. And it does often take a while to kind of reach that level 10 realization. And Dominique at the end of the Fountainhead, that realization that like those who kind of, what's the saying, like those who matter don't care and those who care don't matter. I know that's not a perfect quote for this, but kind of like the evil don't, like the good guys are good, like I don't know, love the good and who cares about the others, right? Just like focus on the positive, I think is how you might summarize it. Daniel has just joined as a member. Welcome to the channel, Daniel Borges. So that's good. There you go. There's one way to pursue your own values. All right. I guess, did you just name something? Do I need to name something now?
It's your turn. I have one final.
All right. You go, and I'll think and see if I have another one as
okay. It's going to sound a bit mystical, but I think in some way Objectivists gave my first full-time job in academia. So the year is the summer of 2015. So I've been teaching at the University of Kent as a teaching assistant or assistant lecturer for 4 years. Teaching here and there, traveling a lot to random places to do outreach work. So good in terms of first steps, but it was a point I needed a next step. And also I had a stream of bad job interviews. So I thought job interviews were always something I'm good at. I had some, and my psychology was down. And I was traveling to Loughborough for a job interview, which would be something like 4th in that summer. And I remember I was like, okay, here we go again. Who knows, it's going to be, waste of time. And then in the car, I have my Kindle. I'm like, okay, what to spend on time? I was like, let's read Atlas Shrugged again for a second time. Or I don't know, just want to spend some time. I start reading it. And already from page 1, although the page 1 is not super hard, from the first pages, my whole outlook changes. Like, wait, why do you have this outlook? No, this is a world where good things could happen. So I know this sounds cheesy. I know this sounds like, but it's exactly the truth. Within half an hour, I was on a completely different mindset that no, we go there to pursue something, we're going to do it. And of course, what's the phrase Razi uses? I knocked it out of the park in the interview and everything was good. And I think it has to do up to a point with this change in my psychology, in my emotions, which happened from spending 15 minutes in the universe of Atlas Shrugged. So cheesy story, but true story. And I used it laugh because there's not like major takeaway. It's just something personal, which I always remember.
It's wonderful. We got a super chat from Phil, 20 pounds, saying, I'm grateful for Ayn Rand's thoughts coming again later in life. Absolutely. Yeah, I guess this, I don't know how concrete this is, but this sort of this questioning of altruism, I think kind of became real to me at a certain point where like I kind of realized altruism and egoism don't mix. Like you need to pick one or the other. I mean, to pick a mixture is really to pick altruism at the end of the day, just like in economics, to pick laissez-faire and mixed with state controls is no longer laissez-faire. So altruism, kind of like realizing like the premise, this just sort of underlying premise that is fed to us from so many different sources, even if it's not called altruism, but just this unified view all through history and in the culture generally, that your moral purpose is not entirely to serve your own life and to live a good life, that you need to compromise or you need to ideally completely dedicate yourself, that moral heroes, we're told, completely give themselves to others or to God, right? It's never selfish. I think kind of the identification of that by Rand and the sort of blasting of it by Rand, like once that became real to me, once I kind of realized that the psychological effect that has on me, how emboldening and empowering that is, my life was never the same. So I can't point to like a concrete situation, room I was in and an interview I was stepping into, but I remember reading the Objectivist ethics in my late 20s, and like it finally began to click that it's not about politics and it's not about anything like primarily anything more than it is about ethics and egoism specifically.
Right. And so yes, just to link altruism with the last super chat we got from our friend who mentioned something, rediscovering it at an older age. I think these lessons get better if you are old. So in some ways, I wish I had read all these things in my 20s because my life would be somewhere completely different. But at the same time, I wonder, would they land back then? And sometimes you don't know what will make it land. So I'll finish with this story when it comes to altruism. There was one objectivist, I don't know if he has said this in public, so he's going to remain anonymous. So he said once this story about he was driving to visit some relatives. And at some point he stops. And he almost burst into tears. I was like, why am I doing this? I don't have a duty. I don't like these people. Why am I? And he makes a U-turn and leaves. So I've read about altruism for, at this stage, when I heard the story, 7 years. I could tell you the trope. I could tell you the party line. For some reason, that example really landed with me. I was like, is there any time when if I stopped and saying, why am I doing this? And again, this is not to say, don't visit your relatives, but sometimes it lands in a way that you ask yourself, is this really something I want to do? Is this good for me? And it's the power of this kind of examples for me, the concretization. So my takeaway from today is for you, the philosophy has worked on the stage of the very big principles and providing you a very kind of overview of your life. For me, it has been very, very, very concrete and on a very, very small scale.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, again, method is everything, or like asking like why and what to what end is this? So like just kind of asking like, what is it that makes me want to visit these people, or do I not really want to? Is it within my values to spend time with them? Is that it makes all the difference. For some people, visiting family is the sort of challenge because it comes at the cost of their career. Michael Malice, who is not an objectivist, but when he was on the Lex Fridman show with Yaron Brook, he told the story of like how Ayn Rand's influence impacted him. At one point, I think at Goldman Sachs, when he was working there, they wanted him to work on Thanksgiving, and Malice said, no, I'm going to spend it with my mother or my grandmother, who I promised I would see, and basically quit his job. So in that case, to him, family was a higher value in that context than his career or his job at the time. So
and what a good example, because the rationalists there would say Goldman Sachs, that's capitalism versus your mystic family, whatever. Mm-hmm. And yet, no, it's what's in the context of your life.
Yeah, anyway. I mean, and it could turn out you made the wrong decision as well. Like maybe at the end of the day, maybe his family is not that great. I've never met them. All right. Let's wrap it there. We've got at 7 p.m. UK time, Enjoy Parenting with Lisa Van Dam and Kyle Steele. Today's episode is The Allure of Club Sports. Oh, that sounds like something Nikos would want to watch. Is it football? No. At 10 p.m. UK time, it's Robert and Amy Nasser celebrating 1 year of Life on Earth with special guests. So check that out, coming out later today. Thank you all. Thank you, Nikos. And tomorrow is Philosophy Friday. That's going to be me and Jason. That's going to be very cool. All right, everybody. Thanks, Nikos.
Thanks.
And
bye-bye.
Goodbye.